So, Tyler, one of the things, my son reached out to you and he asked to have coffee because he was in the middle of a really hard decision and he was struggling to make it. And I love so much that he chose you because what better person than Tyler Lafferty? So, very
Well,
wise choice on
thank
Stetson's
you.
part. But through that conversation, you coached him. You didn't tell him what to do. You were coaching him. And through that conversation, he actually came to an important realization and an important decision that he needed to make. And I think there's a lot of wisdom that as parents we can draw from this and relate it to our kids and their career journey. Can you speak to how do we coach instead of tell?
That's a great point and a great question. I appreciate that. And I absolutely enjoyed my time with him. What a wonderful young man. He needed the chance to process. He needed somebody to process that with. And we all know, and we have to recognize as parents, we know it, we don't like to admit it, but we know it, that parent child dynamic is not always the best to process that through. It's hard to believe, and some people do it well, and more power to them. But whether it's dad to son or to daughter, whatever, that parent to young person dynamic to our own children can be really hard. And so I love the fact that I only assume that you guys told him, hey, you need to kind of work through these ideas, these decisions. Why don't you go talk to some people? And was lucky enough that he chose me as one of the people to talk to. But I think that's a huge learning that we need our young people. We need to, as parents, say, hey, why don't you go find somebody you can talk to this, and process this with, even before a quote informational interview or anything like that within a specific industry. But maybe there's some certain things that they just need to talk to somebody who's been down this path. And that person likely won't give them all the answers. And that's not what it's about. It's about them feeling it and those neural synapses happening where they're getting their own answers and they're being able to talk through it and start to weigh some options. And that's really all we did, was really talk a lot about the different options of how will you feel if you don't do this, and what does that look like, and how can you play that out 6 months, and then down 6 months, what are the options if you decide to go backwards and want to change, or is there still possibilities again? And so I think a lot of those conversations are reducing fear. Fear comes in, feeling that we're making singular decisions. This is going to be my only choice, or that kind of thing. And that's never the case. But we certainly feel that way in the moment, whether it's choosing a college or whatever it might be. And so we talked about that. We talk about what are the changes of, if you were to make a change in the future, what would that look like? And it starts to reduce that fear. I've come to find out that fear in most situations is a lack of information. And when you can actually get more information about any sort of situation, it tends to lower that fear. And then you start to move forward more confidently. And so that's really important. You have to recognize as a young person or as a parent, like, hey, my young person needs more information. So I can maybe push them into going and talking to more people, or, hey, why don't you, go talk to the school counselor, go talk to a successful person in that industry, or a business person, or whatever that might look like, but somebody else other than them to process that with. And I think that can be really, really valuable, really valuable.
So as you are thinking, that is so helpful, I think, as we think about what our role is in helping kids to navigate their career path. Is, yeah, our role is to support them and help them and answer questions, but sometimes our role is to help point them to other people who can help them. And who are those people? And how can we, like, for example, just the other day, I said to my friend's son, I said, okay, this summer, you and me, we have a date. Because she's like, I don't know how to help him. He's not willing. He gets frustrated when I start questioning him about things.
Of course.
And so I said, okay, then I'm taking that over. Give me the baton. I'm taking it. Thomas, you and I, we have a date this summer, and we're going to go to coffee. So, that is, I think, for parents also to have that, a little bit of that burden lifted to say, oh, wow, it doesn't have to be all on my shoulders. And I can actually resource other people to help my child. And how beautiful is that? Because that's a part of this web of network and support that we get to have around us. And most people are honored when you invite them into that process.
I agree. And as parents, that's not to say that we're taking away giving advice, right? I think as parents, we know our children well. We want to be able to recognize and talk about some of the traits that we see in them that we then can see like, hey, I think, but it has to be just that. Hey, I think this could work. You know, you have this tendency, this trait, this skill that could work really well in this job. And even with my own kids, I have my oldest daughter is, vivacious and outgoing and just an absolute, go-getter when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I would have told you career path wise, I would have said, oh, she is going to be a salesperson. She's going to be a project manager, like checklist, check, get stuff done. She's going to be, I could have thought that she would have been like a health and fitness instructor of some sort. Like, I'm like, okay, that's totally her, helping people, working with them and like, getting clients and all of that. My daughter is taking a job at a biotech company as a scientist. That's the route she chose. And along the way, my wife and I are, again, saying things like, well, I just want to talk about some of your personality types and this, that. And so we were trying to throw those out there and make her known. And she just, kept saying, I want to be a scientist. And of course, we were like, that's awesome. I love that you're doing this. Let's go get some good experience in this. Let's get some internships. You got to really go and validate these ideas. This is truly a direction you want to go. And at the same time saying, you don't have to do this forever, right? We're not thinking that she's going to be a scientist for the rest of her life. She might decide that she wants to move into sales or she wants to go into project management. Great. But right now, this is what she really wanted to hone in on. And is she building good experience to go do all sorts of other things? Yes, of course. And so I think we have to recognize that. And that's the other thing I do like to tell both parents and young people. When you're looking at these experiences you're going to do, whether it's an internship or whether it's just even some sort of a summer job, or it's going to be, whatever this might look like. And I'll just use waiting tables as an example, customer service. There's valuable skills that you can learn from some of those things. And I always tell young people, think about the skills you're getting from this experience that when you're sitting in an interview for something, a job, or, to get into the honors program or whatever it might be, that you can use and talk about these skills with that person, what you learned along the way. And so looking at these opportunities as building blocks and then being able to speak to them. So again, being a server, some people are like, oh gosh, I'll never be able to talk about that. I'm like, no, absolutely. Talk about how you found empathy for people who were, your clients or customers that needed help, that you had to deal differently with different people because of the mood they were in that day. I mean, there's so many things from a customer service standpoint that you can speak to that an employer sitting across the table is going to be like, oh, you get this, that. And so getting them to think about a little bit differently about these opportunities that they have. And I write about that in the book, but being able to leverage these opportunities, you just have to be thinking, twice about it. My dad, so again, I'll go back. I graduated early from college, a quarter early, and I'm thinking, I'm going to Europe. I'm going to do something cool. I'm going to travel. And my dad says, you got to go get into the workforce. You got to prove to these employers that you want a job, and you got to, 3-month jump on everybody else. You got to take it. Did I do that? Yes. Does my dad regret saying that now? Yes. Because again, I could have looked at that as an opportunity. I could have gone and done some really amazing things, grown as a human, had some cool adventures and experiences that I could have talked about in an interview with a boss that might have then looked at me and be like, wow, okay, he's independent. He's willing to do these things. I didn't do any of that. And so I'm a big fan of like recognizing some of the things you're doing and what are the skills you're getting from that, and how do you then use that in an interview in the future?
Mhm. And that really is something we can help with as parents, is to help our young people see those, because we see them as employers, as managers, as bosses. We see, oh, that clearly transfers over. That skill is clearly shows you have the ability to be a problem solver, or a kind when someone is upset, or so whatever those soft skills are, or even hard skills.
Absolutely.
So
Totally
helping
agree.
them see that, yeah, I think is good.
Yeah.
I am getting a little stuck on the resistance factor, because you did say, there needs to be buy-in, and I agree. So let's talk to the parent who has a lot of great ideas about what their child should be doing, and maybe great ideas about who else they should be talking to. And they're getting just resistance, resistance, resistance. At what point do we say, okay, I'm going to step away for a while and just let this breathe? And maybe I am hovering, but maybe not. Maybe this just is their timeline is going to be different than mine, or there's something else going on that we haven't gotten down to yet. At what point does a parent need to take a break?
It's, I think you have to recognize the feedback you're getting from your young person. And is it, are they taking it? Is it working? Is it not? Are they being resistant? And if they are being resistant, I think you need to recognize that there has to be some sort of an epiphany within them. Let me give you a story. I want to tell you a story. I had a woman call me who this was about spring of 21. So we're kind of into the pandemic, and she says, "Hey Tyler, I need your help." And I was like, "Okay, what's up?" And she said, "Well, my son is at college and he's not going to classes. He's not hanging out with his friends. He's not really eating very much." She said, I'm really worried about him. And the phrase that she used was, "He's emotionally paralyzed." That broke my heart. To me, that's like deep depression. And that scares me half to death. And in this case, this parent understood and was like, "I want to help my kid." I also knew this mom, and I know her to be very driving, very overbearing. I use that word, overbearing. Very driving. She wants the best for her son, and is just, and which I love that and appreciate. And I knew that he was probably feeling that. And so she said, "Hey, would you meet with him? He'll be in town in a couple of weeks." And I said, "No." I said, "You give him my number and we will talk tomorrow." And so, that's our key point there. Give him my number and have him call me. There's got to be some buy-in. There's got to be some that he wants to talk to somebody about this. And we needed that. Thankfully, he did. He texted me. We set a time for the very next day. We got on a Zoom. We started talking, and I started sharing. Well, truth be told, right off the bat, I kind of started making fun of his mom. I'm like, "Wow, like she can be a lot, huh?" And he's like, "Yes." And I'm like, "I get that. She loves you. She cares about you. She wants the best for you. She's just trying to help you." "Well, I mean, I did really well in school. So everybody said I was smart and I should be a doctor." And so I was like going down that path for their sake. And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "I don't want to be a doctor." And I was like, "All right." And then like, I kind of told them that. And so they said, "Well, maybe you should just do business." And so I was taking like general business classes. Like, "Okay, that's fine." He goes, "But I don't know what I want to do with that." I'm like, "I get that. Sure." So we started talking more. I started sharing some of the principles. I started talking about the ideas framework, started talking about how do you work the path, and go down this. What does it look like? And his mom had told me that he was interested in sports. And so I said to him, I said, "Hey, your mom told me like, all the teams, all the stats, all the players." He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "That's cool. That's cool." I'm like, "Give me a class in high school that you loved. What was something that, I'm not saying you got a good grade in, but when you went, like it was good. You enjoyed the time. You felt busy. You enjoyed the work." And he stops and he's like, "Creative writing." And I said, "No kidding, creative writing." I'm like, "That's great. I love writing. Obviously, I wrote this book." And so we start talking a little bit more. And I said, "Hey, man, have you ever thought about being like a social media manager for a sports team, for a college, for a high school, for a pro team, writing stories about rivalry games, writing bios about players?" And when we started this conversation, he has this huge frown on his face. When we started talking about these possibilities and ideas, he starts like going, and he's like talking to me, and he's going, and he's like a mile a minute. And he's like, "Oh, and this could be cool. And you could do this and you could do that." And he literally stops me, puts up his hand, and we're on a Zoom. And he goes, "Tyler," he goes, "I've never let my brain think this way."
Wow.
He goes, I've never allowed myself the possibilities and thought about this as a reality in my life. This is crazy. Like, he goes, I've never, and this smile creeps across his face. and he's excited about thinking about possibilities. And I truly believe this. Two things happened in that moment. One, I think he truly started to have some hope and vision for the future of what was possible. And remember, I talked about that flywheel of motivation that kind of starts when you need to get. So this is what I wanted to say, Alex, to your question is we're trying to get our young people to start to have that a little bit of an epiphany on their own, it needs to come from them to start to have that. So what can we give them? Whether it's a book or something that allows them to have some ignition of like, hey, how can we start some of those crazy ideas and believe they're possible? And the second thing I think that happened for him is he started to realize that nobody else was going to do it for him. Not his parents, not a teacher, not a counselor, that the onus was on him to figure this out, and that he could, and that if he just had a plan to start to figure this out. So fast forward, I actually start working with him, start coaching him, start helping him. And he ends up changing schools, he ends up going to a different school, gets into a sports management program. And I'm like, that's awesome. I love that you're in sports management. How do you know it's right? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, how are you validating that? He's like, well, how do I validate it? I'm like, well, let's go have some informational interviews. Let's do some job shadows. Let's do some internships. Let's see if this is truly a direction you want to go. So I helped him. And I, again, I always make them do the work, but I gave him some names and even greased the skids a little bit. But he reached out to some different people in my network. I said, hey, you can leverage my network. And I helped him find some people in pro sports. I helped him find some people in some semi-pro sports. I helped him find some college people. And, he did some informational interviews and started leaning into that. He ended up getting an internship with the basketball team at the university he was at, the men's basketball team. And that helped him build those experiences and truly validate his direction he wanted to go. And then about 8 months ago, well, I guess now it's probably 9 or 10 months ago, I got a text from him and he was graduating. And he said, Tyler, two things. One, I just want to thank you. I'm graduating college. I'm super excited. I have my sports management degree. I employed all the tactics you helped me that helped me really dream big and figure out where I wanted to go. And two, I'm moving across the country and I'm joining the athletics department and the marketing team at a university, and I'm going to be doing social media for them.
Oh my gosh, I just want to stand up and cheer.
I was so happy for this young person who had dreamed big about possibilities, where he wanted to go, how to make it a reality in his life, work the plan, and then move in that direction. And will he be doing this the rest of his life? No, of course not. But will it be a stepping stone to new opportunities and new things? Absolutely. And he's excited about that. And he knows that. And he's open to it. And so, Alex, that's a long way around to just saying, like, we have to help our young people have that epiphany for themselves. We can't force our ideas on them. And sometimes it just takes the right person to bring it up with them or to hear it, or whether it's a teacher or whoever. And it does what we were talking about, the importance of potentially talking to other people about this. But they're the ones that ultimately have to have this epiphany. And I told you, when I do this work with a lot of young people also, and they start to see it a little bit more, they start to realize how they were dreaming so small. And so when they can let their brain go a little crazier and dream a little bigger about possibilities and see how that might be possible to connect those dots, then it starts to really become like, oh, okay, that would be cool. And I want to give that a shot. I want to try that. I think, and so helping them find that any possible way we can without being incredibly overbearing, because we all know that doesn't work.
Driving without being driving.
Driving, exactly. Without being too driving. Yeah, we just have to love on these kids and help them see the possibilities, and they have to know that we're always in their corner. The thing about my mom, her best trait is she has always been my biggest cheerleader. And she has always been, I always knew that my mom thinks I am the brightest business person in the world. Like that, I'm just like, I've figured it all out. My mom thinks that I'm like, it's wonderful. Like it's so good to have her in my corner. And as I grew up as a parent, I started to recognize one of the best things that I could do was not to be dragging them along this path or to do this, but was to be behind them and be the loudest cheerleader they had. And to say, hey, I'm with you and I got your back. And if you stumble, I'm here for you. And like, you go, go, go. Like, go. And I think that's incredibly important. And that's how young people respond and what they need. And that's where some confidence gets built when they feel like somebody's in their corner, has got their back, is behind them. And like, they have the chance to then go and take some risks and try some things about figuring things out. And again, if you find yourself waiting tables, because that we all think that's the worst. Oh, I graduated college, I'm waiting tables. We think that's the worst thing, right? Hey, they're doing the work, but I still always tell those young people, you still got to be working the plan. You still got to be reaching out to people. You still got to be validating, these different directions, these different industries that you might be excited about. Keep doing that work. And it's okay to be waiting tables and being a good tax-paying member of society, like my dad wanted, but to be, but to keep working on yourself and trying to figure some of this stuff out and believing that it's all going to work out and that you're on the winding path, and that's okay.
Mm. Gosh, that story is so inspiring and I think really helpful actually to see where someone was and where they ended up because of this kind of thinking, this opening up of their thinking and some new awareness around their skills and where that might go and where that could go. So you've talked several times about your ideas framework, and can you speak a little bit to that? Give us some meat on the bones of what that is.
Absolutely. So the ideas framework, again, it's an acronym for introspection, design, exploration, adaptability, and service. And they kind of build upon each other. So introspection is really about, like we said, better understanding who you are as a human. I truly don't think we take enough time to do that. There's too many distractions in our lives. Our cell phones are just too easy to pick up. There's studies, heard some study that like 77% of people, young people particularly, when they have nothing that's captured their attention around them, life around them, the first thing they do is pick up the phone. And I'll be honest with young people, that's me too. That's me. I'm waiting in line. And the first thing I do is I satiate myself with some sort of social media, some sort of dopamine hit from the next email, whatever it might be. And I'm just saying that because I think we just have to call it out and recognize it. I'm not shaming anyone. I just like to bring it up with the young people, like, is that you? Because that's me. Is that you? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, let's just recognize it. If that's the case, then likely we're not taking the time to better understand who we are as humans. And I think there's value in that. And so, Krista, you and I kind of jokingly rattled on about personality tests and those and how fun they can be to what you can learn. Kids actually love those, whether it's Enneagram or some sort of Myers-Briggs or whatever it might be. Young people really enjoy coming and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so me. I'm like, well, yeah, you answer these questions and there's so much good that can come out of getting these ideas to the forefront and having these, knowing about yourself and your personality. And so the super, super valuable in the introspection phase. We do some personality tests. We do some core skills tests to better understand, are you a builder? Are you an analyst? Are you about time management? Are you a creative? And so there's about 13 that we've come up with that are important to better understand, like what core skills do you have? We all have like 1, 2, 3 that are just kind of we're innately gifted with and that God gave us and who we are. And so recognizing those, right? And the extreme I always say is, I don't want to put an introvert in a sales job, right? So just knowing that about yourself is incredibly important. Like, oh yeah, these are my skills. And I get fulfillment by doing time management. Like when I'm doing that and I'm checking boxes and I'm making this happen, I'm bringing other people along with me and I'm making the team work. And okay, you get fulfillment from that. Good to know. Let's try to maybe look into some of those jobs that utilize those type of skills, because at the end of the day, when you utilize your core skills and you're looking back on what you did that day, you're like, that felt good. That feels good to utilize those things of what you're good at. And that feels fulfilling. That's important. There's happiness that comes from that. Not saying it's easy, but it's absolutely can feel really, really good, which is important. So introspection, we also do that industry mapping that I talked about. So dreaming big about possibilities. And industry mapping is a 10-question thing. And it's not about getting done with the 10 questions within 20 minutes and going, oh yeah, I totally know what industry I'm in. I always tell people it takes a month, it takes 2 months. It's that time in the shower when you're like washing your hair and you're like, oh, that would be cool. And I'll give you an example, just if I could real quick, about industry. I had a young man that I was talking with, and we were kind of doing a little coaching session. And he said, or I said to him, I said, give me an industry that you're interested and passionate about, that you think you might want to, learn more about. And he thought for a second and he said, the ocean. And I was like, the ocean. I'm like, that's not an answer a lot of people would say and again, I'm using air quotes, an industry, but it absolutely is an industry. And I said, I start to go to conservation. How do we get plastics out of the ocean? I start thinking about fundraising for that. I start thinking about the actual work of getting the plastics out of the ocean, what that looks like. And then I said, I said, the second thing I start thinking about is recreation. I start thinking about how do we take people out and enjoy the ocean and do that kind of stuff and everything that goes behind that, and being a part of a company that makes that a reality. And then I start to think about manufacturing products for the ocean and what that looks like. And I had said to this young man, I said, hey, would you like to meet a friend of mine who owns a surfboard company? And would you want to talk with him? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Which one? And I said, oh, it's Almond Surfboards. They're down in Newport Beach. And he goes, that's the first surfboard I learned to surf on. Mm. I'm like, that's awesome. Let's connect you with Dave. He's a great human. I want you to talk with him. And so they ended up doing an informational interview. But like thinking and dreaming big about these industries that likely you wouldn't have thought, oh, as an industry, we think of architecture and we think of medicine and we think of some of these very traditional things, which most kids can come up with about eight different job types, not even industries, job types. Yeah. And there's a woman that I follow that she talks about vocational creativity. She goes, most kids don't have much vocational creativity. They can come up with about 8 job types. And so we're trying to show kids all these different ones in all these different industries. Again, I said this earlier, if you could wake up and go into work in an industry that you love, how incredibly fun and exciting that is. Now, yes, a lot of people say you got to follow your passions. Well, that's hard, like that advice. I'm just saying, how fun would it be to dream big about possibilities, like we talked about basketball, and to work in an industry that you're excited about, that you would love to be a part of, that you want to be around. Like that's fun and that's passion. That's passion, and that's great. So introspection is this initial phase where I got to better understand who I am as a human and what lights me up, and maybe see if those are directions I want to go. Once you have some answers there, then you go into the design phase, designing a plan of the job types, the people, and the companies that you need to go learn more about that are in these things that you've kind of brought up for yourself. So you need to go and do some research and finding the companies that are in those industries, in the ocean industry, that, okay, I need to go talk to some people in there. And then you need to go work your network. You need to go talk to your family. You need to talk to your parents, your grandparents. You need to talk to your friends' parents. You need to talk to anybody you possibly can and try to figure out, like, is there anyone I know in this industry that I'm excited about? And maybe if I'm lucky enough, in a job that's aligned with kind of who I am and what it's about, so I can go and have a validating conversation with them, which is then the next phase. Once we've kind of figured out who the people we need to talk to, we go to exploration, and that's the go and do. That's the actually having the informational interviews, the job shadows, the internships or apprenticeships, and I call those career connected learning opportunities. Those are things where I always tell young people, when you're having this conversation with somebody, a 20 to 30 to 60-minute informational interview, and you're asking, what do you love about your job? What do you not like about your job? How did you get here? What advice do you have for someone like me? How's the industry changing? And again, in the book, we give all these questions, and young people can come up with these questions if they just take a little time to figure it out. I always ask young people, are you leaning in? And is this like engaging and interesting what you're hearing from this person? Or are you leaning out and you're like, ugh, gosh, that is not what I thought at all, which happens all the time. We romanticize this job or what we think it's going to be, and then we find out what the true day-to-day sounds like, and we're like, oh. And I always tell a young person, if someone tells you some of these stuff, you have to also, kind of check the source. Is this guy just kind of down on his job? He's been doing it too long and he just hates it. Like, recognize that. So talk to multiple people and try to really find it. But are you leaning in or are you leaning out? And both of those are really valuable to better understand. But then try to keep going in terms of more conversations. Go and try to get a job shadow where you spend 2 to 3 hours on, at the job, on the job site, see what goes on, actually see what a meeting is like, or, and hear what's going on. Is that environment engaging and interesting to you and exciting and what you thought? And then, of course, the internship that most of us know about, but that is valuable to put on your resume and show that you're moving this direction. That's what you want to do. So exploration, incredibly, incredibly important. And exploration is really the phase that, and I appreciate you saying this earlier, Krista, if a school is talking about something, usually it's the exploration phase. So they have software where you can go and look for hey, take this little skills test and figure out what, industry you might want to go into and that kind of stuff. And that can be valuable. I still find great value in that. but we're not doing enough work about the introspection piece on who we are and really starting to understand that enough. And then it goes into adaptability. And adaptability is, I built that in because I really wanted young people to really push themselves. Like, am I on the right path? And have that courageous conversation with yourself. Is this really for me? And so we talk a lot about journaling your experiences and some of these different things that you can go back and really start to understand, like, is this truly a direction? And you have to be incredibly honest. And we talked about, if you've been going down this path, if you've been getting kudos all along, and this happens all the time with like medicine, right? Like, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. And you get a lot of pats on the back because that's fantastic. Yes, go be a doctor. And so we keep going down that path. And then you go and do your exploration. You realize how much school it takes. You realize how much, time you have to spend in the hospital and all that. And you're like, oh, maybe that's not exactly up my alley. Mm-hmm. Fine. But now you're scared because you've been telling everybody that's what you want to do. So you have to be courageous and say, I don't know if that's really the direction I want to go. And maybe you need to work yourself back up into the introspection piece and say, hey, I'm still interested in healthcare because the reason I wanted to be a doctor is I wanted to help people and I still want to do that. Great. If you recognize that about yourself, what else might you want to do? Maybe you want to get into physical therapy. Maybe you want to get into being a nurse. Maybe you want to be an admin, work in hospital administration. Great. There are all sorts of other jobs of helping people that you can do within that maybe you can work yourself back up that and then design a plan come back down. Or you're going to validate that, no, this is the direction you want to go. You feel good about it and you're on the right path. Awesome. That's incredibly important about adaptability. And then the S is service. And I am just a huge fan of, if I am going to be talking with a young person, I'm going to talk about the value of finding that connection to your community and why that's so incredibly important. Giving back, living a life of service. I call it BITSU. It's an acronym for be in the service of others. It's my own philosophy of how I try to live my life and be in the service of others. And I believe it is incredibly rewarding to do so. And so I'm going to make sure people, understand that. And I always ask young people, how many of you have done a volunteer opportunity? And most kids' hands get raised and they're like, absolutely. I'm like, how did that make you feel? Did you love that time? Did you love that experience? Did you, were you happy with yourself when you gave back? And most all of them are shaking their head yes. And I'm like, exactly. How wonderful the duality of that you can actually help somebody else, but then you also get something wonderful from it. That's a wonderful feeling. And so then we start to talk about, hey, almost like the introspection piece, you got to figure out what lights you up, because what comes to service, what comes to philanthropy is not the same for everybody. And what you might excite you is different than what excites somebody else. So maybe you want to read to young kids. Maybe you want to help the elderly. Maybe you want to help the environment. Maybe you want to help pets and animals. That's great, but it's likely different than somebody else. So you have to identify what are those things for you that do excite you and what kind of work in service kind of lights you up and what you want to do. And then, of course, the reason we introduce that to young people is we have some that say, that is awesome. I want that to be my day job. And then they might want to go work for a nonprofit and they really love how they feel when they give back and they do that work. And so then they're going to explore that, wow, this actually might be my career field and in a direction I want to go. And I want to do that. So of course we want to introduce that to young people. And I just believe the importance of any person finding that connection so that they can have that purpose, fulfillment, and happiness, which of course is absolutely possible in the job and in the work that we're trying to help them figure out. But it is also incredibly available in service work and being in that service to others. And so we always bring that up with young people and help them explore that for themselves. So that's the breadth of the ideas framework. There's work to be done in all of it, and we help young people down that path and kind of what that looks like.
It's so incredible, Tyler. Like, I just keep thinking, thank you. Like, thank you for taking this on as your passion, as a place where you want to pour into, because it's so important. And you're right. We want our kids to end up in a place where they can thrive ultimately. Like, that's our hope.
Absolutely.
And so how do we help them? And what is the path that would best serve them in this? And I think at this point in the interview, people are saying, how do I get more of Tyler? How do I get this framework? Give me all the things. And so can you maybe tell people about Slingshot and how maybe they can access Slingshot or some of the materials there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So wrote the book, and honestly, like, I jokingly said I was done. I'm like, I wrote the book. I'm just going to hand it out to all the young people I know that need it, and I'm going to back away. and that was, going to be enough for me. And I got challenged by a number of people that were like, okay, that's great, Tyler. And the reason I even wrote the book in the first place is I was getting a lot of kudos from adults and young people, but like, this is really good content. Young people that were finding value in it, adults that were like, oh my gosh, I want my young person to do more of this. And so that's why I took this, and it was a presentation I'd ultimately been giving, and I turned it into the book. I got challenged by some people that were like, what are you going to do with it? And being an entrepreneur, being, a business guy, I thought, well, along the way, I thought I could start a coaching company that coaches these, principles to other coaches, and then they can build coaching practices around the ideas framework and do that. And we're in the middle of the pandemic. Zoom is getting bigger, so we're doing, so much more virtually. And so that was my initial like for-profit idea, because that's initially the way my brain is like, well, I got to figure out how do we make money. Well, we can charge it for services. We can do this. And so that was the initial idea. As I again was challenged by some people, they're like, well, that's great if you can afford it. And I'm like, okay, good point. And they're like, but you do a ton of work with like under-resourced kids. What about those kids? And I'm like, okay, good point. How are we going to reach those kids, and how can this be available for them? Because they need it just as much as everybody. This is what I've learned, is this is across all socioeconomic backgrounds. It does not matter. We all struggle with what this is, and understandably. And so I said, okay, we got to figure this out. Well, what if we could actually get into schools? And Krista, you said it. A lot of schools are not very good at making this a reality. They call it advisory. A lot of schools call it advisory. But when pressed and you talk to, I've had a number of principals tell me like, yeah, we call it that, but that's not really well used time. Our teachers are like, yeah, go do some research on your own and come back with and tell me, but there's no curriculum, there's no structure, and so sadly, these kids are coming out with no real direction on what that looks like. And even the schools do have mandated software that they, like I said earlier, that they could use and stuff like that, but it's not working. They're not getting enough from that. It needs these other bolted services, these on top of it to help kind of frame the whole thing and really help young people with this. And so we basically then said, okay, what if we take the ideas framework, make a curriculum around that, and can come into a school and help them make that a reality? And so we did that. We do that in 4 high schools currently in Spokane, that we're working with over 1,600 kids that worked the process over this last year and did this. We'll be doing that again next year, and likely double and or triple the program next year, which is really exciting. So more high schools are coming on board and making this a reality. We're always up for talking to other markets. If there's, we've talked to other universities in other markets. So a lot of people say, oh, is this only in Spokane? I'm like, no, I've done this in Nashville, Tennessee. I've done it and lots of other places. And so I'm happy to have those conversations and do that. But so that was kind of the first pillar of delivery that ultimately started to get going, was working with the high schools and universities in getting this in there. We did one of our local universities, we did a 1-credit seminar, and we actually did this for kids, and it was great. They loved it. They were the ones that were so lit up. And of course, the question they ask is, why isn't this required my freshman year? And
Exactly.
I'm working on it. So with our local universities, I'm working on trying to figure out how do we get this to be integrated into that freshman year, so that they can really start to be challenged with this work and do that. So love the work that we do in schools. We're going to keep doing that. And we're always open to talk. If there is an educator that wants to talk more about this, we're always open to that conversation. The second delivery pillar was that initial idea I had, which is our one-to-one coaching program. And we do have a one-to-one coaching program if people want to pay for it, or we can grant scholarships. But we do a one-to-one coaching program where we have coached some coaches, and we allow them to then have a coaching practice based on this. And those are great, because it's more of that one-to-one, more accountability, more personalized. And we can really get in there and work with somebody to make this a reality. The third one, which is probably the one I'm most excited about, because I think it has the most growth, and is going to be really fun, is an online guided group coaching. So we're going to be able to allow young people to have access to all of our videos, all of our resources, all of our activities, but then also meet weekly with a coach. And we're looking at about a 5-week program time frame, where they can work the ideas framework, do some homework on their own, go through the videos, do the activities, and then come back together in a group cohort setting, have group discussion, talk about it, what's going on, but really that accountability of helping them down that path and what that looks like. So We are launching that in August of 2024. So whenever this ultimately hits the airwaves, but come to helloslingshot.org to learn more about that. But we're always up for a conversation. If this is something that you want and it is you want to help with your young person, and it's maybe in any of those delivery methods that I talked about, great. But of course, at the end of the day, I'm just about impact. So I want more and more young people to do this. So get the book. You can buy the book on Amazon and read the book. Like I said, it's good for parents. It's good for young people. I'm the guy who jokingly says, why did I write one more book that, thinking that one more book that, 16 to 24-year-olds want to read. So, but it is written as a novel. So it's, it's pretty easy to read. It's pretty fast and you can, get through it pretty good. But that's a really great way for young people to get that and start to maybe down that path, download our playbook, start to do some of that. And so if that can be useful, absolutely, we're all about that. So, but yeah, helloslingshot.org is our web address, and it's probably the easiest way to get a hold of us and start to look through what we have to offer.
It's brilliant. I mean, Tyler, it's brilliant. And it just excites me so much that you're using all of your gifts and talents for the benefit of others, for our young people. And I love it. And I'm going to send this interview to all my kids, of course, but also to my nieces and nephews and friends' kids. And because, yes, a lot of parents are going to be listening to this interview, but we also need our young people to be listening to this interview.
Yeah.
Because it's going to open up their thoughts and it's going to help them to have maybe a new perspective and mindset around their journey of finding a career path. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that. And it really is about helping them connect the dots. I mean, helping them to see that it's possible, because that's where most young people get stuck is yes, I want that. I don't know how. And so, and this program is not the end all be all, but it will definitely be something to motivate some ideas and thoughts and actions that will, I guarantee, be productive. And so, it's just helping those young people feel like they have some answers and be like, okay, I get it. I can work that. I can do that. I can lean into that. Again, they all want to answer that big question, what I want to do with my life. They just need a little bit of help on how to connect those dots.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tyler, thank you. So helpful. Yeah. What would you say are just your last words to people, whether it's parents or young adults?
I would say be patient. I would say give yourself some grace, because it's all going to work out. And I truly believe that. And we're all adaptive human beings that learn to figure it out. And it's easier for me at 49 years old to look back and say that and see that and know that it's all going to happen. But it's so hard when you're 18, 19, looking into the future and you're, not really sure about what direction you want to go. And to be okay with that, and to be up and open for the adventure, for the journey, and for the learning. And if you can change your mindset, I don't have to have all the answers, but I can be open to the journey. I can be open for this adventure. I can be open to what I'm going to learn along the way. Then it's going to be way better and way more fun, way more interesting. And that's really what I want to impart on young people, is just be open to the journey. It's going to be awesome.
It's a great word to end on. Thank you.